Welcome, everyone. Hi, good morning. Thanks for coming. I'm Andrea Sato. I work on adult programs at Wilton Library, and we're glad to partner with the Wilton Youth Council today and many times during the year on important programs that are relevant to you. The only thing I will say before I turn it over to Carrie Ann to introduce the speakers are some notes about upcoming programs that I hope you will also attend. We have a number of poetry and literature programs in the next couple of weeks. And one that I think might be fun for some of you, I don't know, I will be here on October 7th. It's a Saturday. We're doing a coffee and chocolate tasting and learning the history of coffee and chocolate at 2 p.m. So sign up for that if you think that would be fun. Anyway, thank you for coming again, and I will turn it over to Carrie Ann. Thanks.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming. I'm Carrie Ann Finelli, and I work with Wilton Youth Council on parent education. My partner, Heather Benedetto Reading, is here in the front row. We're thrilled to be meeting at the library in this beautiful space. Thank you to the library for supporting the event, and to Michael Bellicosa, Andrea Sato, and Thomas Kozak for all their help in preparing for today. We would also like to thank the Wilton Kiwanis Club and the Wilton High School PTSA for their co-sponsorship of today's presentation. You can find lots of information on our website, www.wiltonyouth.org. You can sign up for our monthly newsletters and take a look at some of our past recorded events. There's a lot of great topics for parents in there, so take a look at our website and dig in. I have an important plug for a very exciting event coming up on October 17th at 7 p.m. New York Times best-selling author Jennifer Wallace will be here at Wilton Library for an author talk moderated by Dr. Susan Bauerfeld. They will be discussing her highly acclaimed new book, Never Enough: When Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic and What We Can Do About It. And I'll tell you a little secret. Wilton, Connecticut is mentioned in the book because Jennifer did some of her research here. So it's really exciting. Please come out and see this. Also related to that, Dr. Kevin Smith, Wilton Public School Superintendent, will be doing a follow-up book discussion on October 26th at Comstock Community Center at 10 a.m. So if you love the book and you want to talk more about it, come talk to our superintendent, who will lead a great conversation on the book. And I'm going to hold up the book so you can see it. And it will be on the back table if you want to pick it up afterwards and just take a quick peek. Today's event is being recorded and will be posted on our website for a limited time. Susan and Dina will take questions at the end. If you prefer to just maybe like raise your hand or something, we'll come around with a mic. Let us know if you have some questions, and then they'll be able to answer. As always, we'd like to remind you that Wilton Youth Council programs are for informational purposes only, do not constitute medical advice, and are not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Before you leave, please complete the brief evaluation that I handed many of you, and if you didn't get one, you can find one at the back. We really take a look at these to try to improve our programming and make sure we understand community needs, parenting needs. Now I'd like to introduce our presenters. Susan Bauerfeld, PhD, is a licensed clinical psychologist, speaker, parenting coach, and ADHD coach. Her passion is promoting understanding and teaching skills for success, especially skills of self-regulation, anxiety management, effective communication, and self-advocacy. She has a private practice in Norwalk. Dina Merowitz, JD MSW, has had a multifaceted career, including experience in graduate admissions and working in the public policy arena around education. As an educational consultant with the Bertram Group, Dina advises students throughout the entire college admissions process, planning both undergraduate and graduate educations. So thank you both for being here. Susan?
Hi, good morning. A big thank you to the Wilton Library and the Wilton Youth Council. I love having these opportunities to reach out to the community, and Wilton Library and Wilton Youth Council are really good advocates for our youth. So today, Dean and I will be talking about the college process. That's why you're all here, right? We'll be talking about slightly different aspects of it, but we're pretty sure that this is how you'd like it to go, okay? Nice, even steps, climbing up there, you reach the top, you get the flag, you get the bumper sticker, you get the sweatshirt, here you're already. Everything's all set. But this is usually what it looks like, okay? A lot of stuff happens. Okay, and the stuff I'm talking about, when I say stuff, it's situations that have uncomfortable facts and feelings that go with them. Okay, so, we live on the East Coast. Your kid might only want to be looking at schools on the West Coast. Yikes, how am I going to do their laundry, right? Okay. Lots of decisions to make. It costs a lot of money. So there are lots and lots of things that can interfere with that smooth progression up. So what's a parent to do? What's your role? So here's the common solution. Worry about all that stuff. Worry, 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 worry. Okay? And what worry tells you the answer is I've got to get rid of all that stuff, and I got to make sure they achieve, oh, that'll feel a lot better. And so there you are. Rah, 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 here we go. Okay. And sure, that does feel better. When they're achieving, when they're at the summit, it's great. Okay. But let's take a deeper dive into what this solution does and does not do. Okay, so the rah-rah, let's go, strive, achieve. I often, when my clients are from Wilton, I say it's the Wilton way, right? Okay, this is the way. This is what you do. You encourage the striving and achievement. And Jennifer's book is all about this culture. I highly, highly recommend it. It's a tough, sobering read, but it is really, really, there's hope in it too. So you encourage this striving. And don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with supporting striving and, encouraging excellence. Nothing wrong with that. But that tends to be most of what we do. And then on the other side, we worry about surviving. And by surviving, I'm not just talking about staying alive. Okay, that's a piece of it. So your healthy habits, sleep, eating, all of that. Okay, how many of you are worried about your kids' sleeping habits? Yeah, okay. It's part of surviving. You got to get enough sleep to survive. You got to eat well to survive. But you also need to be able to cope with all that stuff that's happening. If you can't cope, you don't survive very well. And something that we often don't recognize as part of survival is connecting with others. We are a social species, and we do not do well if we don't have good connections with other people. It is essential to our survival, especially for children. Human children are dependent on their parents for a really long time. And without that connection to a caretaking adult, they don't make it. So we're hardwired to have this need for connection and a drive to be connected to other people. And we're going to look at in a minute what happens to connection when you worry. So here's this common solution. We've got this combination of rah, rah, go, achieve, 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 strive, 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 okay? Plus, worry about survival. So let's see how it stacks up for our surviving, striving, and thriving. Striving, yeah. Kids are achieving a ton, right? Okay? Surviving, okay? You're worried about their sleeping. You're probably worried about their friendships. You're probably concerned about all these things. Concerned and worry are different, but it's questionable how well they're surviving. They're really not thriving. They may look like they are, and some of them are, but a lot of them are not thriving because thriving requires a balance between striving and surviving. So what do we do about that? Okay, right now, in this model, all eyes are on the prize. All eyes are on the summit. Got to get up there. And the belief is, and it's a cultural belief, it's not just you, okay? The culture says this. If they get to the top, then everything's okay. Then they'll survive, then they'll thrive. So we'll just wait till they get there to take care of all these other things. They'll just be taken care of by themselves once they're up there. No. Okay, I use an analogy of Mount Everest a lot. Okay, I have this weird fascination with Mount Everest. I have no illusion that I would ever even get to base camp. It's just too hard. But what it takes to get up there is really extraordinary. And when you're in this area that's circled here, okay, if we put this on Mount Everest, this is called the death zone. And it's called the death zone because on Mount Everest, up there, there's not enough oxygen to support human life. So when you're in the death zone, you're actually dying with every step. Okay. Now, why do I bring this up here? Because there are some leaders who will get you up there even if you're not an experienced climber. But those climbers, when they get into the death zone, they can't manage themselves. And they're at very high risk, far higher than anyone else in the mountain, of dying on the way back. So if you don't have the skills to manage what it takes to be where you're going, it's hard to survive up there. So again, what do we do about that? Get your shift together. What I mean by that is shift the focus of your attention. Shift it away from the summit is everything and shift it more to really putting a lot of resources into your relationship and resources into support for coping. Okay, coping is really essential. It's part of surviving. Okay? And simple striving without coping, it just doesn't work out that well. Okay, so I love this quote by Jon Kabat-Zinn. Okay, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. So your role is to be more of a coach for their surfing. Okay, not a coach to make sure they get to the summit, but a coach to help them surf and manage what it takes to get there and the stuff that happens along the way. So a beneficial base camp, using this analogy with Mount Everest, is key. Okay? You want that base camp to be a respite from all the pressure. Okay? Trust me, there is enough pressure to survive out there to, and your kids feel it, they know it, they have it. You don't need to add to it. You really don't. Okay? It's already there. The schools provide it, their peers provide it, the culture provides it. What you can do more effectively, what will benefit them more, is be a respite from all of that. Be a place where they can rest and recover and make sense of what they've experienced out there. Okay, so they can't survive without this relationship. It's part of why it's key. It provides them with shelter, protection, security. You all know that. Okay, these are important things that you do for them. And the important thing that we often don't pay enough attention to is providing resources that help them make sense of and cope with all that stuff that's out there. Okay, we give lip service to it, right? We say, you need to cope better with that. But how? Okay. We get them therapists, we get them coaches, we get them all these things, but the agenda there, they clearly know the agenda there is not as much the coping. The agenda is, let's get this problem with coping out of the way so that you can strive again. That's not the kind of support for coping I'm talking about here. This is the kind of support that's just integral, just part of what you do. That talking about coping and how are you managing is a routine part of what they can count on you for. And that happens more readily when there's connectedness. Connectedness is the source of your influence. Okay? You don't have any control. You may believe you have control. You have the illusion that you have control, but really you don't have any control. Have you ever tried to make a kid eat? Okay, think about when they're little. What happens when you try to make them eat? Okay, yeah, it gets ugly and gross, right? Okay, spitting, vomiting, biting, okay. Long-term consequences of trying to make a kid eat, eating disorders. When you are influential with their eating, it's because you're responding to them when they're hungry with the offer of food. And if they're reluctant, you have enough influence, if you know that it's important, then they eat, and you have enough influence to control or persuade them to eat. It's all about influence. You can abuse your influence and be controlling, that's true, but that's still the power of influence. And influence is much greater when you have this sense of connectedness. So there's a long-term study at Harvard. And there's a recent book that the title, I think it's called The Good Life, was written about this study. It's been going on for 83 years. And it's one of the few studies of adult, functioning, adult well-being. So they've been following men who started, some of them were college students at Harvard 83 years ago, or when they were teens, whatever. I can't do that math in my head. And then they had a cohort, 2/3 of which lived in the Boston area. So kind of a mixed cohort. So they've been gathering all kinds of data on these men and their families. So their spouses, their friends, their children. And so they not only have, data about well-being, they also have data about health, which is part of well-being. So they have tons of data, and they're looking at it and saying, okay, so what makes somebody happy? Okay, well, a lot of people think money and material resources do that. And I'm a little ahead of myself. I have a slide on this a little bit later. And there is a point to that. At a certain point, you need enough money and material resources to get your basic needs met. If you don't have that, it sucks, it's not good. So there's a certain level of that, but beyond that, the thing that matters more than anything else is connectedness. Connectedness means somebody who's got your back, somebody to whom you matter. And Jennifer's book talks a lot about mattering. It's really important. So when we look at Basecamp resources, we've got these material resources, we've got these non-material resources. Material resources, money, schooling, food, shelter, coaches, computers, all these things. These are important, right? And they're really helpful, super helpful. And we're really focused on seeing that our kids have enough of these, right? And it's not that they're unimportant, they are important. But the overall message kids get when they have these things is, and I'm talking about the we here, parents, we are investing in your future success. Okay? Important. And not a bad message to let them know, right? The non-material resources, connectedness, I think, is the king or queen of all of these. These are C qualities. This comes from internal family systems, which is a theory and a paradigm in psychotherapy that I use a lot. But these are the 7 C's, and they're really important. Connectedness, calm, compassion, clarity, confidence, courage. these qualities, which are non-material, they're hard to measure. When these are present in your relationship with your child, they communicate you matter. You matter to us. Okay? Investing in their future without a sense of mattering turns out to be not so great for kids. We all need to feel like we matter. So having a balance of these resources is really important. And we tend not to think as much about the inventory of these resources as we think about the inventory of the material ones. So here's the slide that comes out of that happiness study at Harvard. Okay, the line in the middle here is once you have your basic needs for food, shelter, and security. So what's the contribution then of money to happiness and well-being? It's important up to that point and a little bit beyond that, but that's about it. It levels off after that. The importance of connectedness to well-being and happiness and thriving, which is, I think, what we all want for our kids. We want them to thrive. We don't just want them to get that good job. We want them to be happy and healthy in that job. And in order to do that, they need to have this sense of connectedness with you primarily, but also with their friends. There needs to be time for that. So let's look at this base camp formula for managing the college process. We've got support for coping plus connectedness. Okay, and you've also got enough support for striving, which is in the surfing. Surfing is striving. So let's see how that measures up. Kids will strive when they have support for coping and connectedness. They're naturally driven to strive. They're naturally driven to move the next step further. Okay, we all have wiring that promotes that. To the extent you see kids shut down, it's because something's really blocking that natural drive to move forward. Surviving, if they're coping and connected and their basic needs are met, they're surviving. And when they have both of those, they thrive. So the shift to moving your lens away from primarily on the summit to putting it on your base camp and what happens there really is helpful. And one of the biggest problems that interferes with that is worry. Worry diminishes connectedness big time, really gets in the way. So we're going to take a little detour to the brain here. Okay, so we're going to talk about two basic areas of the brain. I'm going to go through this pretty fast and oversimplify it. If you have any questions about it later, feel free to ask. So this lower part of the brain, on board when we're born, limbic system, always scanning the environment to notify us about anything that might affect our well-being, either positively or negatively. Tells us, oh, there's a good berry there. Go check it out. You might be able to eat that. Or, oh, there's a bear. Stay away. This works automatically in the background all the time. It's really important. We need it. This is our anxiety system. Okay? Anxiety is actually a helpful thing because it helps us know, gets our attention that something might affect our well-being. But it's very reactive and impulsive. Then we have this front part of the brain. It doesn't come fully on board until our kids are, young adults. Average age is 25 before this area of the brain is fully developed. But this is the area that's responsible for planning, organization, initiating, connectedness. This is the area that helps us be kind and compassionate. Brain develops back to front, top to bottom. This is being developed in your kids right now. It's not fully developed yet. So it's important that you have access to your area of this brain so that you can bring those C qualities. Let's look at what happens when the brain starts noticing stuff. First, it notices the stuff, Okay, if something's going on with your kids that's of concern, you're naturally going to pay attention to it. It's a good thing. They need us to pay attention to things that might affect their well-being. Okay, and the example I'm giving here is Sam struggling to focus on college. If we start worrying about this, oh no, what if? Okay, don't want Sam living under a bridge or in my basement for 40 years. Gotta get on this. Okay, if we start worrying about it, here's what happens. The alarms go off in that lower area of the brain. And when that happens, we lose access to the part of the brain where we have the ability to plan, be kind, be compassionate. All of that goes out the window, not because it's not there, it's just because we blocked up the access to it with all these alarms. It's always there, you just have to make some room for it. But worry crowds out the room. There's no more space for it. And when this happens, look what's happening to Sam. Sam's over here dealing with the stuff or not dealing with the stuff, depending how well Sam is coping. And in the meantime, you're busy with your worry. You're inside with your worry. Sam's all alone. Okay? Worry really interferes with connectedness. So we call this you lose your shift. So getting your shift together, this is what getting your shift together looks like in the brain. So you still notice the stuff. It's still of concern. Okay, but you wonder instead of worry. And when you wonder, you keep the focus out on what's going on with Sam rather than in with what's going on with your own worry. So, and then you get curious rather than furious. So you wonder, okay, I wonder what's going on with Sam. And you probably all do this, right? You probably wonder about this. But often the worry is so quick to come in that the wondering quickly turns into worrying, and that's what you want to catch. You really want to catch it, and that's what getting your shift together is all about. It's about keeping the attention on the wonder and not letting it shift over to the worry. So what are the elements of a beneficial base camp? This is what I'm suggesting you focus on. Okay? And by the way, I know you're all here for the college process, and we haven't really talked about that yet, and I want to acknowledge that. Yet, in my opinion, this is so critically important. And I raised 3 boys. They all had a different college process. Some of them were rocky, some of them were not. But one of the things I really learned was the importance of this. And that this, when we started, my husband of 40 years is here, when we started focusing on what mattered to the kids, and focusing on helping the kids know that they mattered more than this college process, things turned around pretty quickly. And not going to go into details, but some of what needed to turn around was kind of bad. So, all right, so a beneficial base camp is rich in C qualities. And what those C qualities communicate to your kids is you matter. Okay, we don't intend to do this, but all this focus on striving and, the right school, and even if you're talking about it as the right fit, all this intense focus on this gives them the message that that matters more than they do. And that's what we want to shift. We want to shift so they have the clear sense that what matters most is them, not their achievements, not the amount of money they're going to make, not whether they get a dream job or not, but them right now, that who they are right now matters to you. I am confident you guys have taken time out to be in this room to listen to this. I am confident that your kids matter to you, but they may not get that message enough. And that's what we're talking about, is shifting your behavior, your way of handling this process so that they get that message more than the only thing that matters is that you get to the summit. Okay, so how do you do this? You devote more resources to helping them on the way than to making sure they get up to the top. Worry loves nothing better than saying, I got to make sure. Got to make sure. But you can't make sure. And you give them the illusion that there's a way to make sure, and that's actually not very helpful, because sometimes, actually on the way here, I was listening on NPR to a woman, last name was Chang. I didn't have a pen, so I couldn't write down her first name, talking about hard choices. And one of the things she said that really struck with me is that hard choices are defined by the fact that one is not better inherently than the other, that they're just different. And most people stop at the point where they define, okay, so I've gotten all this information about the pros and cons of this one and the pros and cons of that one, and now I have to decide, and there must be one that's right. Well, maybe not. So her advice was that the next step is you pick one, you become the author. She had an acronym, author. You become the author of what's going to be right for you. You create that by committing to this choice. So by helping kids cope with the fact that there isn't a right choice, that there isn't a, that this limited set of schools that we think are the only ones worth paying for is not the only path to success, they're going to cope a lot better. Okay, provide resources that are relevant to what's going on with them now. We're so focused on fixing their futures that we tend to not focus on what's relevant to what's going on them now. Their friends are relevant to what's going on with them now. Coping with, the beast that is social media is relevant to them now. All these things are relevant to them now, but we think of them as, enemies of success and enemies of striving. So we just want to get rid of them. But they need help with those things too. Okay? The help is also reasonable and reliable. By reliable, it means that it's consistently available and it's consistently helpful. Okay? Shel Silverstein has a wonderful poem called Helping. And the last stanza is, and some kind of help is the kind of help that helping's all about. And some kind of help is the kind of help we can all do without. And help that's not really relevant, and help that's focused on something that doesn't matter to the person you're helping right then, that's the kind of help we can all do without. Okay, and the help is collaborative and respectful. Respectful of where they are. Okay, if your kid is an average student, and P.S., most of them are average, I hate to tell you, but that's what average means, like most of us. Okay, we want everyone to be an exceptional, but the math doesn't work that way. Okay, if you look at your bell curve, what we're asking of our kids, here's our bell curve. The middle is most of us. Okay, so most of you, the only thing that matters is being exceptional. Okay, when we tell them every day, you should just do your best. I don't care what your grades are as long as you're trying, doing your best. That sounds really good, doesn't it? And there is something valuable in there. I'm not going to deny it. But it still sends this message that your average every day is not good enough. Okay? So being able to respect where your kids are is good enough. Okay? If they get a sweatshirt from a school nobody's heard of, respect it. It's okay. They can still be successful. Okay, so here's what the beneficial Basecamp response to stuff looks like. So here's Sam, stuck on the mountain with the stuff. Not there yet. Your worry wants to get activated. You're going to notice it, as you should. Okay, it's important. It's helpful to notice it. But when you notice it, stay there. Stay there. and get curious. What's up? How are you handling this? What can I offer to help? I'm confident you're doing pieces of this, but if you do it with the agenda of the part of you that needs them to be at the summit, they're not going to experience all those C qualities. Okay? It's important that those C qualities are present, that you are really there with them where they are, not distracted by your worry about the fact that they're not up at the summit. Okay? And then that helps them take the next step. And that's what you want them to do. You want them to take the next step. Okay? You don't want to be stuck helicoptering and snow plowing the rest of their lives. Okay? You want them to be able to take the next step and cope with whatever stuff comes up. Maybe with your support, but your support is different than a snowplow. So again, worry shifts the nature of that beneficial base camp. It shifts it from this place of being responsive to where they are, the availability of all those C qualities, and makes it look more often like this. And trust me, my base camp looked like this a lot when my kids were growing up. Okay? Oh my God, how could you do this? Can't think of how many times I threatened to shred the Xbox games, or, I did lock it up in the safe. So all this dysregulated yelling, losing your shift, okay, this is what worry does to base camp. And it's not good for anybody. It's not good for you. It's not good for the kids. Okay, so here are the helpful parenting tools. And I'm going to go through this quickly because I want to leave enough time for Dina here. So first is get your shift together. Figure out how to manage your worry. We all worry. It happens, but worry is thinking, and you can shift your thinking. Okay, the anxiety piece is normal. We want that. Anxiety gets our attention to things that we probably should pay attention to, but then we've got to shift over to coping. And once we do that, the anxiety drops down. But when we worry, we do the reverse. We amplify the anxiety. That's how anxiety gets disordered, is when we worry. Okay, so you want to stay calm, curious, and connected. There's a mantra for you. Stay calm, curious, and connected. Focus on coping, not just achieving, and teach them how to do all these things too. So here's a way, quick and dirty way to manage worry, get your shift together. Spot it. First thing is you want to notice, name, and normalize whatever concern you have. Sam is pretty overwhelmed by all these catalogs coming in for colleges. Sam's having trouble managing this. Okay, that's a concern, it's a valid concern. Then notice you're worried thinking about the concern. Oh, I'm worried Sam will never be successful. I'm worried Sam won't, will not get it together, and then his friends will move on, and then, her peers will just mock her. I'm just worried about all these things. So notice that those two things are different. Concerns are different than worried thinking. So you notice both, and then sniff it. Will that worried thinking and the alarms that it sets off, is that going to help address the concern? I don't guarantee much, but I guarantee that almost all the time the answer to that's going to be no. Okay, that worried thinking does not help you address a concern, even though it seems to seem like it will. And then shift it. Shift to wonder. Shift to curiosity. Shift to coping. Okay, so here are some helpful shifts for surfing during the college process. Instead of thinking of it as the big step, it's just one step on an ongoing path. Okay, and if they don't go this year, maybe they'll go next year. My kids are all on their own, successfully launched, and each one has had a very different path. Some of it has involved college, some of it has not. Okay, instead of worry, wonder. We already talked about that one. Instead of getting furious, oh, I did so much of this. I've made, my husband's a little calmer than I, but he's a spreadsheet guy. And so I was like, your father's made all these spreadsheets, okay? And you haven't even looked at them. Why aren't you looking at them? He's put in all this time and effort onto these spreadsheets. Why aren't you looking at them? Okay. So instead of being furious, get curious. I wonder what the problem is with the spreadsheets. I wonder whether, some other way of looking at this would be more helpful for Sam. Okay, instead of thinking about your job as getting them to the summit, P.S., they really get themselves there. And if they don't, once they get there, they struggle like those climbers do in the death zone. Help them manage the journey. Help them cope with what it takes to get there. Instead of we are looking at, and this is one of my pet peeves, okay, my teen is interested in. Okay, you're not going. As much as you'd like to go, you aren't going, okay? So if you're one of these, Dina may talk about this, but if you're one of these parents who can't help yourself from asking questions on the tour, go on a different tour than your kid so that you can get, you can fantasize about what you would want to do when you got there. Okay? But this is their journey. It's not yours. And in achievement culture, we've made it our journey, and our kids know that. And they're desperately afraid of disappointing us. And because connectedness is so important, they will go to extreme lengths to protect that. And if disappointing you is a threat to connection, they will stay up 24 hours a day to not disappoint you. Okay, this is not something we want to burden them with. Okay, instead of did you? How was school when they come home? Greet them like your dog greets you. This is my dog, Luna, who is a bit overly enthusiastic with her greetings. I don't quite recommend the intensity of her greetings. But there's no judgment. There's just, oh, I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy you came. And this dog greeting is actually mentioned in Jennifer's book. Because it really communicates how much you matter. Okay, instead of constant college talk, this is something that our middle son taught us, who announced rather abruptly, we are only talking about college on Sundays for an hour. We were a bit taken aback, but we respected it, and it was one of our best decisions. So set a time each week for college talk, and the rest of the time it's about them and what matters to them and what's going on in their lives. Okay, instead of thinking of this as a prize that you've got to secure, okay, it's about finding a good fit. Okay, it's about what they're going to do when they get there. That's the next step. What are you going to do when you get there? This is not an end point. This is not the defining moment of their lives. Okay, what they do when they get there is what matters. So instead of evaluating, a lot of this comes from how to talk, so kids will listen. Instead of evaluating, describe. Describe and clarify. So instead of that's a good school, describe the school. Oh, that school has an interesting theater program. Sam's interested in theater. Or, that school has quirky kids. Sam's a quirky kid. Sam would fit in with quirky kids. Okay, so describe and clarify rather than evaluate. And instead of trying to fix the future, just be with them now. Be with them now. Okay, they'll be gone soon enough. And keep breathing. Okay, it's just beginning for them. This is not the end. Okay, thank you. Okay, and any questions before we turn it over to Dina while she's getting up here?
So we're singing your song too. In fact, every time I talk to parents, I wish Susan would do this presentation first, because this is the most important part of the process to me, is the sort of support. Whenever I start to work with families, the question is, do you want to go to college? Right? That is a question. And some students know that and some students don't. And if they don't, then there's a million other things that they can do. This is focused on the college admissions process and for students who think they want to go to college and for families who are trying to support students as they go to college. But that certainly is not the only option out there. And in fact, even when students start this process, I say this is, as Susan said, just one step in the path. You can get off the path and go in a different direction and stop and start. There are no rules about finishing college in 4 years. There's no rule about finishing high school in 4 years. So, this is about supporting who your kid is, when, and where they are. So that's basically our take on it. Whoa. Okay, so this is more about the. Should I do that? Okay, thank you. Susan's my technical coordinator. Thank you. So this is, really about the practical aspects of the college admissions process, and how to be supportive. Whenever I do these presentations to parents, I always say, sort of as the first thing, that nobody really needs to hire an independent college admissions consultant like me to get your kids through the process, right? Kids get through this process. Everybody's got a college counselor at school. What I provide to families, I think, is the reassurance that Susan is talking about when you sort of forget that. And my goal is to reduce the anxiety around this process and give some insight into it, because I was in admissions and I think there's a lot of misinformation about that. So this is going to really focus on college fit, and what to consider and how to look for it. So, I think we start from a place of anxiety, at least many of us do, in terms of thinking about the college search. I'll just say as a caveat, I just went through this with my own daughter, who is starting at college. She just started 3 weeks ago. And I thought I was going to be awesome at this with her. First of all, she's like, Mom, let me just dispel this idea that I would ever listen to your advice, okay? And then the second thing was, we did actually hire somebody else to work with her. And she's like, all the things that you have your clients do, not necessary, okay? So I'll just say, I thought it was very good information from her, right? What I'm trying to do is to cover kind of all the steps that you can do, so that looking back, there's less anxiety that sort of can help. But this is a process where a lot of it is out of your control. And I think to acknowledge that sort of early on is also important. So the beginning of the college process is sort of done without thinking about all the options, all the places out there. There are actually 4,000 colleges in the United States that accept students. They have an admissions rate of 70% or higher. We tend to focus on these 12 or 15 that we know on the East Coast, a couple in the Midwest, and a few not a few, but the ones on the West Coast. But I do just sort of like to bring that up so that everybody can kind of acknowledge that. And so what I want you to do is to sort of think about, let me see if I can get to it, the 3,000, thank you, colleges that are out there, the 4,000 that students can get into, and think about them, not just these 12 or 15 or 20 that you hear about all the time in the media. So I want you to think about not the school itself, but really, where is my student And there are so many opportunities. There's so many great places that could work out there for my student, and to really think about the process from the beginning in that way. Still learning this. All right. One organization that I really like is Challenge Success. This is based at Stanford. It's in the Graduate School of Education. And they've done a lot of research really about college selectivity and it not being a reliable predictor of student learning, job satisfaction, or well-being. So what their research has found is that there's a pretty modest relationship between financial benefits, if that's an important part of this process, between attending more selective colleges, but that those benefits generally apply for students who are first generation and underserved. We also find that, let me see if I can, Susan, how do I move this down? Maybe I gotta go do this. Nope. Okay, well, we can do that. Yeah, thank you. Rather than choosing a school based on this sort of flawed system of, is it the most selective? How many students are accepted there? You're thinking about where is a school where my students really going to be engaged at the college in ways that will allow them to form strong relationships with other students and with professors and mentors. Where are they going to be able to apply their learning via experiential learning, internships, summer experiences? That makes tons of difference. And really, where are they going to be able to find a community of people where they can engage and be happy? So all of these things are really much more important than the name of the school. And I know that's a hard thing to consider, but I love that there's great research out there. And so really, I suggest you guys take a look at this Stanford white paper and to look at the whole website. It's a great resource. So these are the three things here that are really most important in terms of student success after college. So I'm just going to tell a little story here. So our daughter's at college, and we've talked to her 3 times, I think, in the 3 weeks that she's been gone, which has been a great sign to me that she's out there and on her own. And the most important thing that I heard from her was how excited she was that when she was brushing her teeth, there were like 10 other people out in the hall, Mom. And like we were all talking about cool stuff and we were all brushing our teeth. That was the thing that was most exciting to her. I mean, she's really enjoying her classes, but it was that sense of community and sense of mattering to her that was helping to make her thrive there. Now, of course, it's only the first 3 weeks, and I'm sure we'll be surfing the waves. I'm sure there will be things that come at us. But that really struck me because that was such an important thing for her that she wanted to tell us about. Not how her classes were, not, really how hard she was working, how many hours she was spending in the library, but that she was brushing her teeth with other people that she really engaged with. So when you do think about what a balanced college list looks like, these are some of the most important, or not most important, but some of the most common things that people look into, really. The size of the college, the location, the academic rigor, what the academic offerings are and the strongest programs, what housing is like, getting a sense of the student culture, student life, and of course, financial aid and need. Usually I start with a list of about 20 colleges, and we break that down eventually to the time before a student applies to be about 8 or 10. It's a really, really stressful process. It gets more stressful every year. This year, the Supreme Court decision in the end of July impacted the college admissions process for every student applying to college this year. And I have students who are writing around 50 essays for their schools this year. It is a really arduous and difficult process, and it's really important to support them because if they are writing 50 essays, the way that those essays are the most compelling is if they really feel good about the schools on their list. And to have too many schools on their list that we might want on there because somebody in our family went there, or we think it's a great school, or it's got a great name, or it's so selective, really can be too much. So I'm seeing a lot of struggles with that this year. There are so many things to think about, not just the essays, the application work, supplemental essays that I just mentioned, creating a resume, which many colleges ask for in this process, talking about the interview process and helping kids prep for that, really understand how to interview at a school who's using that as an evaluative part of the process. And then college visits, which can be some kids they're really important for and some kids they're not. And nobody needs to visit every single school on their list, period, right? That's a ridiculous amount of time and energy and money. And you can get a sense of the schools by visiting different schools in different ways, different locations, depending on what your criteria are. All of your schools are going to have these college counseling platforms. Naviance, Maya Learning, College Kickstart, SCORE. Are these familiar to any of you that are? Yes. So these are helpful in some ways, super stressful in some ways for your kids. The schools will be able to show you on a scattergram with data where the students from that school's students have applied. So which colleges that they've applied to, where their grades and scores have been, where students have been accepted, denied, deferred, right? And how they've applied, whether they've applied early decision, regular decision, early action. So all of this data, it can be helpful. It's not a crystal ball, and it can also be really, really overwhelming. So I say this because be aware how this information that your child is definitely going to get during their junior year is impacting them. And does it make more sense to have this, or does it make less, right? Are you looking at Naviance more? Are you panicking about where your son or daughter is going to be accepted? Or are you just like pulling this back a little bit? Because I do think there's some value in it, but you really want to watch how it impacts your own son or daughter. So I get a lot of questions about this. When I'm working with students on a balanced list, I want to make sure that every single school on their list by the time they're applying is a school that they would go to if they were accepted, right? There's no point in having a safety and applying for a school that they don't want to go to. Now, that does not mean that every single school has to be thought of the same way. You could definitely have priorities. I do hate the word dream school. I don't think it's a helpful term. And I think that there are so many colleges that can fit that. But I do think that, you can't expect your kid to feel the same about every single school on their list. They're going to have priorities and to really respect those. But I think that it's really important that there are two on there if they want to go to college that that are going to be a safe bet in terms of admissions. So here are what a safety, a target, and a reach are. A safety is a school where there's a very likely chance of admission. The student's test scores, GPA, and or class rank, if that's what your high school considers or tracks, fall above the 75th percentile of the average admitted students, and the college accepts more than 50% of its students. A school that's a medium chance of admission or a target or probable school is a school where, oh good, this is coming out. A student's test scores, GPA, and class rank are close to the majority of accepted students in the middle or 50 percentile range. And then these are the reaches. These are the super selective schools that you hear about all the time. Many of them have admissions rates of less than 10%. And for every single student I work with, these schools are reaches, every single one, because of the admissions rates. So that's sometimes a shock to parents that any school that they might be thinking of that somebody in their family went to or that they visited in Boston it or in New Haven, that, yeah, we think we've got a pretty good shot there. Well, the admissions numbers are so low that nobody has a good shot there. Okay. So there reaches for everyone. And it's a lot of pressure to feel like, okay, this school, if I do all the right things, I'm going to be accepted. Because frankly, you can do all the right things and not be accepted. And it has nothing to do with the fact that you've done all the right things. So here are some tools for college list building. I just went and gave some books. Yeah, thanks. Back there. And these are some books. I use these resources. Many of them are online. But these are some ones that I think are really helpful. The Fisk Guide to the Colleges is like the basic. I have an online version of it. It is like the one objective source out there. It's sort of like those of you remember Ruth Reichel in the New York Times doing like her disguise, going to the restaurants in New York City. This is like the objective person going to the colleges. They're not laying out the most beautiful parts of the campus. They're not doing a curated tour. This is a person sort of getting the dirt. So it's a very helpful resource. The other one is Steve Antonoff, who's a colleague of mine, who really sort of started the whole college fit idea. And he has a variety of quizzes, a variety of resources, lists, so that students can figure out the qualities that are important to them and then find the colleges that might correspond. And then there are also all kinds of different types of colleges out there. I have a book on creative colleges for students who are interested in music and performing art and theater. And that process is very different. And then there's cool colleges, which is actually sort of like quirky colleges. If your student is sort of not on the straight and narrow path, our daughter definitely was not. It was more of a quirky student. And she's really found her quirky people at college. Sort of schools that are off the beaten path, that might have more experiential learning, that might not have grades, that might be focusing on just teaching the classics. All sorts of different colleges out there that are different than the 12 or 15 colleges that you might have heard of. And then, of course, there are the schools for students that have learning differences. The colleges, unlike your high school experience, have a different threshold to meet in the law. So in high school, your son and daughter is entitled to learn in the way that they can best learn, and the state has an obligation to meet that. When you go to college, that shift, the shift happens with the American to Disabilities Act, and you're dealing with a different section number under the ADA. And so there, the idea is that colleges need to make a reasonable accommodation to a disability. And so the colleges have a floor that they must meet, but many, many colleges meet much more than that floor. And so I'm often helping families sort of figure out which colleges meet that criteria and how. Okay, so this is sort of how to be thinking through this big list, to really think through your values, the things that are most important to you. And of course, I just talked about some of those criteria: size, location, academic strengths. But then there are things like this is very important. How does your son or daughter learn best? Where do they sit when they're in a class? Are they friends with their friends from the time they were in preschool? Do they love diversity? Is there a particular interest that they have that they really want to continue at college, or something they haven't done that they want to be trying? Do they thrive in experiential learning experiences where they're not in a classroom? Do they have difficulty sort of sitting in a classroom? What would happen to them if they were at the back of a lecture, right? So these are questions I think about. What do they want to look at when they think about their college environment? Do they think of like being near a bustling city or a barn or being in an enclosed green space? What is their comfort? So sometimes kids don't know, and we work through these questions and think about them and talk about college visits throughout the process to get a sense of what priorities matter to them. And again, I start with about 20 schools. I really do that so that we're not missing schools that people might not have heard of. But then we end up narrowing down that list to around 10 schools. And again, I think more than 10 is really, really too much work for students to be working on. You'll notice that kids are applying to around 18 or 20 schools in many situations. And in my opinion, that's just like way too much stress. When you do look at the colleges and you're looking at the college websites and you're doing other things beyond the FISC guide, you want to be really, really aware that these are very carefully curated advertisements. When I was at Columbia, we were super concerned about our website. They were our way that we showed that our student community was vibrant and diverse, that our classrooms were beautiful. Every single campus you're going to look at on the East Coast is going to show a picture of a multicultural group of students under a deciduous tree. That's very, very calculated, right? And so you want to sort of figure out ways, and this is something that I help students do, to kind of go beyond the advertising. So to ask questions in a different way that it's presented to you. Instead of asking about, what's the student professor ratio, for example, that's something you'll always hear about at every college visit or you'll see on every college website. Ask, what's the largest class that a freshman would ever have during their first year, right? Instead of asking like, oh, do the students have great relationships with their professors? You can ask, who's the one person when you're on a tour or when you're talking to a student, who's the one person who stood out to you from your first year of school? Or who's the most important administrator or faculty member that you connected with during your first year? So we are really, really good at these advertisements, and I want you to dig deeper than what you're just being presented with. So when you go on campus tours, get off the beaten path. This used to be really a problem during COVID because the colleges were completely closed off. But now you can sort of take a look at what the boundary between the college campus looks like and the town or the city, because you are going to see the most beautiful parts, the new construction, the most beautiful buildings on campus. And it's important to sort of do a deeper dive than just what you're being shown. And then you really want to prioritize your criteria carefully. This is really hard for students. And this is one reason why it can feel so overwhelming. I do a spreadsheet. I'm sure your husband would like over here. But there are other ways to do this. After you sort of think through what things are most important to you. Oops, can I get this already? Here's an example of just one way to do this. This is not something I do for everyone or my clients do with their parents, but to really think about what are the things that are important to you and think about how those colleges are meeting those criteria. It sounds simple, but what happens is that, you look at one college and you're like, oh, I love the creative writing program at Kenyon. It's so awesome. But I love that NYU's in a city, and so maybe I'll include both of them. But then again, I don't really want to be in a big city, but you can go back and forth and find lots of different sort of reasons why a particular school might fit, but what you're trying to do is narrow it down. And so you're being sort of strict, or this can help sometimes to be sort of rigid about these criteria and about how the school meets it, and then you can sort of get to a list. So you can see here the college that probably you want to keep on this list is College of Worcester, maybe Bard and Kenyon, but maybe SUNY and NYU would not be on this list for this student. So I did talk a little bit about this. I have students visit the campus when they can of a few schools that are different from each other. And to be very careful about the generalizations that might be made on the tour. Yes, I suggest parents try to keep quiet on these tours. I'll never forget the experience I had. I can't remember which campus it was on. It was in Pennsylvania somewhere where I was doing a visit, and a parent asked, "Where can my son access birth control on this campus?" With this, I thought the kid was gonna like literally melt through, right? Like, definitely that kid is not gonna have that school on his list, right? That's all he remembers from that visit, and it could have been a great fit. So anyway, as much as you can kind of like hold off and not sort of ask these questions, pay attention to what your son or daughter is asking if you can do that. And then when we would get in the car ride on the way home, we would not talk. We wouldn't be like, "Oh, I really like that. Just wait. Wait for them. Wait for them to say something or to not say something. And try to just like sort of maintain. Let them realize that this is their process, that they're looking for the things that are important to them and that you're okay with that. You can absolutely reach out to current students at the schools and come up with calculated questions to ask. And do a deep dive. If students do have an academic interest, and some students do, and some students don't at all. But if they do, there is a way to sort of look more deeply at the academic departments at the colleges, again, because they're all sort of showing their strengths, and to look at, okay, how many professors here have terminal degrees? If you're looking at the psychology department, how many professors are full tenures? Do they have the classes that are interesting to you in that area of study? How big are they? And so to really figure out some specific ways to avoid the overwhelm. A lot of parents are interested in the employment statistics in graduate school, which is really important. You can find out that information. And again, they're going to give you this response. 90% of the students in our college find employment or in graduate school within 6 months of graduation. And if it's important to you, say where. Where are they going? What does employment mean? If it's not, then don't. But there are ways to sort of go beyond the basic information that the college is going to provide to you as they're advertising. So I do say, let me just make sure. I do say to take notes after each college visit, because it can be really overwhelming. To do those pretty quickly after a visit, because if you're visiting, a group of 4 schools at one time, or visiting a couple of schools over a weekend, things can start to blend. They definitely do for me. So I take my notes right after I visit a school. And then there are other considerations. I talked a little bit about learning disabilities and questions to ask. I haven't talked about questions to ask, but I have very specific questions to ask for students and for parents. And I'm happy to share those with you if any of you have students with learning disabilities and you want to find out about the level of support of a school. There are a lot of resources on the web. There is a classic resource I have back there on colleges that have learning support. The other thing is sort of emotional and mental health support. This has been a huge thing in the past 5 years, but even before COVID, it was definitely an issue on campus. Counseling opportunities at college. Does the school have a philosophy to support students' mental health? Carleton College in Minnesota, which is a school that I love, they actually, Macalester, they actually sort of require a therapy session for students during their first semester. They really obviously care about students' mental health and sort of thriving, and so that's part of their program. The other thing is to think about, I'm always asking all along the way, do you want to go to, not challenging, but just making sure that this is something that you want to do in the way it's being presented to you as in next year, right? There's many more ways to do this, as I said. So if people start to lose steam, if students start to lose steam, if I notice a shift, you can defer. You can take some time off. You could do a gap year. There are other ways to be on this path than just this straight ahead, everybody goes to college right after high school. Okay. these are just a list of some colleges that are great for students with learning disabilities. Some of these you may have heard of, and some of them you may not. They're not in any particular order there in terms of the color. That was just to make the slide more interesting. And there are lots and lots of other colleges that also work for students that have learning disabilities. And I have the same thing here for students, for resources for mental health on campus. There are two organizations that are really well known, JED and Active Minds. And these are organizations that require, in order to be sort of a member of one of these organizations as a college campus, you need to meet some criteria in terms of the sort of support that you offer students on campus. These colleges are well known for having support for students. Macalester is on there, you can see, and so is Carleton. But there are many others as well that have recognized the sort of emotional difficulties that students are having at college and how stressful college is and how stressful the college application process has become. So these are some good things to think about too as you're doing your research. And then the most important, well, not the most important thing, but one important thing I think is to really think back to when you had your child or when you adopted your child, and that all of the resources that were out there to help you during that time, the what to expect when you're expecting, and how excited everybody was for you, and how those resources helped, right? And this is, for many parents, for us, it was the biggest sort of decision, the biggest milestone. I mean, it was our daughter's decision, but the biggest milestone in all of our lives since she was born. And so realize that, that this is a very big decision, but it's only sort of, and so support yourself and your child as much as you can, but that this is only one of the decisions along the way, right? This is not the end of the road. This is not in any way the biggest decision. This is just one of them. And for some reason, this has been blown up as like the most important thing. You can't read the newspaper or listen to the news or without seeing college admissions. But try to step back from that, because even though it runs the industry that I'm part of, it is overblown. It is one decision, not the decision. And then also be okay. Part of this is to really be okay with kids not knowing. To ask your 17 or 16-year-old or 18-year-old to know what they want to do, what they want to major in. I mean, I am not doing what I thought I would be doing when I graduated from college. This was not even a career choice then. This was not it. So just to sort of be okay with that too, to be okay with the ambiguity and be okay with the not knowing. Some kids might know, some kids might not, some kids might change their mind along the way. Anyone who is in college admissions gets that, right? They might be asked, unfortunately, what major they want to choose, but let me tell you, we're doing that for our own purposes, like to understand if we're accepting enough students into areas of major, but we also know that a lot of those students are going to switch gears, and that's completely okay. And this echoes a little bit about what Susan said, but be curious, right, about where your student might be happiest, and make sure you're listening to that. Make sure that your own sort of voice isn't drowning that out in this process, because that can just make this process much more difficult for everyone. But I guess that's it. So I'm happy to answer questions with Susan.